Most companies proudly say that they are carbon neutral. That does not necessarily mean that they have reduced their emissions at all. And this is where the confusion begins. Terms like carbon neutral and net zero are used interchangeably, but they are not the same. In fact, the difference between them changes everything. Because one of these can be achieved mostly on paper, while the other requires real measurable change across operations. So, if you are working in ESG, sustainability, or even just trying to understand climate claims, the distinction really matters. So, let's break this down simply. What exactly is the difference between carbon neutral and net zero? Let's start with carbon neutral first. Carbon neutral means you emit carbon and then compensate for it by buying carbon credits. So effectively your net emissions becomes zero. But here is the catch. Carbon neutrality does not require you to reduce your emissions significantly. You can continue emitting as long as you offset those emissions somewhere else. Imagine an airline company operates worldwide and emits 1 million tons of carbon every year. Instead of reducing emissions, they can buy carbon credits that claim to remove or avoid 1 million tons elsewhere. On paper, they are carbon neutral, but nothing has actually changed in their own operations. Now let's compare this with net zero. Net zero is completely a different approach. Net zero means first, you reduce emissions as much as possible across your operations and value chain, and only then you offset the small amount that you cannot eliminate. So the priority is reversed. Not offset first, but reduce first. Going back to the similar example, if a steel producing company emits 1 million tons of carbon in a year, under carbon neutral, it offsets all 1 million tons. However, under net zero, it reduces maybe 80-90% of its carbon emissions with the help of multiple green initiatives across its operations and offset only the remaining 10 or 20% of it. So, here is the simplest way to understand it. Carbon neutral means offsetting emissions, but net zero means reduce emissions deeply and then offset the rest. And this difference is not just technical, it is fundamental. Because carbon neutrality can sometimes create a false sense of progress. A company can appear sustainable without changing how it actually operates. Net zero, on the other hand, forces real transformation. It requires changing processes, improving efficiencies, rethinking supply chains, and that's why net zero is considered more credible and much harder. But this raises a deeper question. Where exactly do these emissions come from inside a company? Are they from factories, electricity, supply chains? To understand that, you need to understand something called Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3 emissions. And that is what I will break down in some other video. If you want to understand carbon, ESG, sustainability and climate from a real world perspective, stay tuned. And thank you for watching. Signing up for